Our next session is a panel discussion on China's Digital Silk Road, Cybersecurity Issues, China and NATO Relations. I'd like to warmly welcome our 5 distinguished panelists who will each make their opening 10-minute presentations. Dr. Annita Larissa Sciacovelli, professor at the University of Bari Aldo Moro in Italy. Dr. Giorgio Caridi, professor at the eCampus University in Rome, Italy. Dr. Anahit Parzyan, Executive Director of the Nork Social Services Technology and Awareness Center Foundation. Dr. Nehme Elias Khawly of INSEEC University in Paris, France. And Dr. Ruben Elamiryan, Chairperson and Associate Professor of World Politics and International Relations at the Russian-Armenian University, where we are sitting today, and the Executive Officer of IPSA in Geopolitics. So thank you all very much for joining us. We will jump right in with Dr. Annita Larissa Sciacovelli's presentation on EU-China cybersecurity cooperation. Dr. Sciacovelli, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. I want to thank Dr. Meir Shakian for hosting me in this important conference, and Mrs. Lara Setrakian, our panel moderator, and all panel members for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. For a few years now, I've been researching cybersecurity in the overall strategic level, as well as international law level. This dual approach gives me a unique perspective to evaluate global political and criminal cyber threats and risks, as well as the measures we need to take to mitigate those risks in an holistic approach. In this lecture, I would like to assess the Chinese cyber threat and propose a cooperation framework between China and the European Union. This framework may also allow a multilateral dialogue channel that can serve other global parties facing these threats, such as the United States, Japan, and others. On September 28, 2021, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, and the Chinese State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang Yi held the 11th EU-China Strategic Dialogue by video conference. The topic discussed were EU-China relations, international and regional issues such as Afghanistan, Myanmar, and the Indo-Pacific. Among other topics, the strategic dialogue also touched upon cybersecurity that has become a major threat to the European Union and the global stability and economy. Cooperation between EU and China on cybersecurity holds great potential for both sides. On July 19, 2021, the EU High Representative urged the Chinese authority to act against malicious cyber activities undertaken from its territory. After that, malicious cyber activities had significantly affected European economy, security, democracy, and society at large. Also, the annual threat assessment of the EU's Director of National Intelligence 2021 noted that China is a prolific and effective cyber espionage threat and that possesses substantial cyber tech capabilities able to disrupt critical infrastructure within the United States. We also know that one of the China grand strategy goals is to become a world leader in advanced technologies, both for civilian and military purposes. This grand strategy of China is called the 100 Years Marathon of China. China decided to replace the West economy and technological superiority and to become the global economic and military power. To achieve these goals, the Chinese economy strategy must rectify some imbalances, among others, high production but low integration of intellectual property. This strategy has two major economic initiatives. One is a very well-known, the Belt Road Initiative, and the other is the Made in China 2025 initiative. This main effort is substantially done by technological investment and an effort to legally transfer intellectual property to China. However, there are many incidents showing that China is also heavily involved with industrial espionage, to steal intellectual property and other illegal activity in order to transfer technological know-how to China. For the sake of our audience, I would like to explain that industrial espionage is defined as an unauthorized possession of confidential commercial information not revealed to the public for attaining technological or commercial advantage. Targets may include commercial entities, academic researcher institute, government ministries, and authorities. Industrial espionage may have two motivations. First, the political motivation to strengthen the state economy, and the second, to gain economic advantage. Findings about cyber attacks originating in China are part of a systematic, orderly campaign of the Chinese government. I would like to give one example of my country, Italy. The Guardia di Finanza have alleged recently that an Italian firm supplying military drones was quietly and illegally purchased by Chinese state companies hiding behind a civilian company. Chinese government hides behind private sector companies to gain access to advanced technologies and eventually to transfer technology to China. There should be no doubt that these actions violate international law, even when it is claimed that criminal groups are behind. The United Nations Convention against transnational organizational crimes, known as the Palermo Convention of 2000, Article 5 deals with criminalization of participation in organized criminal group. Also, the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime of 2001 relates to infringement of copyright and related to rights that specifically deals with intellectual property and intellectual property and copyright. So what can we do? A solution may be the 11th EU-China Strategic Dialogue. In a recent publication, the European Council on Foreign Relations gives the idea of a framework of cooperation on cybersecurity that may be an integral part of the European approach to the Indo-Pacific. Also, during the recent 8th meeting of China-EU Cyber Task Force held last week, it was proposed a bilateral cooperation on a digital economy and cyberspace. Both sides, EU and China, highlighted the importance of an open and non-discriminatory environment for all businesses, and internet governance should be promoted based on principle of openness and inclusiveness. Considering this, I would like to propose an extended diplomatic layer. I propose to develop a cooperation framework between EU-China specifically on cybersecurity. This proposed framework shall include, first, a communication mechanism to discuss various cybersecurity issues between the two parties. Second, an investigation mechanism to review and research cyber incident to avoid false allegation and attribution against China or against one EU member state. Third, I propose a hotline to mitigate imminent cyber threats, reduce tension, and minimize damages. I know this will be very challenging, but it's the way best for cybersecurity diplomacy. The framework shall be developed within EU and international law. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And once more, I would like to congratulate with Dr. Sharkian for organizing this very interesting international topic on such an actual and hot topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sciacovelli, for that fascinating presentation. We'll move on now to Professor Dr. Giorgio Caridi of the eCampus University in Rome, Italy, speaking about innovation and digitization of communication, how to skyrocket the BRI in Europe. Dr. Caridi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy of being here. May I share my screen?
Please do, yes.
So today we're going to talk about the innovation and digitization of the communication, and especially we will see how we can skyrocket the BRI in Europe. So let's start.
Our first animation of the day. It's wonderful.
So let's start with a brief knowledge about the BRI. Of course, it is also known as the New Silk Road, and it is the infrastructure integration project that has been launched by China in 2013 to connect physically, in a more efficient way, three continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. The initiative was focused mainly on two roads, the Maritime Silk Road and the Silk Road Economic Belt. The BRI comprises more than several physical connections, as it amply exceeds the mere trade and financing collaboration. That's the reason why we talk about the digital Silk Road. It is something very important because if we think that in Europe right now, the digital single market is something that has been estimated to contribute by 415 billions to the European economics. The digital aspects is something very important. Okay. The BRI, it begins focusing on four areas, which address both to companies and to country systems. First of all, the main area is the speed. So it is very important that the company should, both in Europe and Asia, and especially in China, should have a perfect knowledge of the state-of-the-art warehouse and the inventory management system. So something that can give a clear image of the situation in a single moment. Then the digital Silk Road has been intended to overcome the incoherence of customs. This is because right now there are different standard systems for customs clearance of goods and artificial intelligence systems. This is the reason why a serious improvement in that, in order to boost the coherence, is something very important to have a better economic result. Then the cost, of course, all the companies in the world are worried about the cost. And this is the reason why automation systems for loading and unloading of goods are very useful to reduce the costs of labor. Another important area is the visibility. This is why digital ledger technology could be used to scale goods loading and unloading operations on time and to monitor routes. So these are the four main areas. We see that a couple of months ago, we did a questionnaire. We administered the questionnaires that is composed of 5 questions with multiple choice answers that have been administered to investigate the knowledge of the BRI, especially the digital Silk Road, and the effects of the relative digitization and the willingness to have an active role in the initiative amongst the Italian companies. We need to say something at the beginning. The Italian productive system is mainly composed, more or less 94%, of small and medium enterprises. That's to say, small companies, if compared with bigger companies abroad. The sample of the study consisted of 300 Italian companies that were equally distributed among northern, central, and the southern of Italy, together with the islands, of course, because we got islands. The questionnaire was mainly composed of 5 questions. The first question, which is the role in the company, was intended to identify the cluster to which the interviewed person belonged to, while the remaining 4 were aimed at exploring their knowledge of the initiative, of its possible implications for companies, and their relative attitude towards an active participation. This is as you can see from the questionnaire, the second company, the second question, I beg your pardon, is intended more to understand the supposed knowledge, because actually we cannot check the actual knowledge. We cannot understand if the answer given by the company managers were real or just a supposed knowledge. While on the other questions, we try to understand which was their attitude toward the digitization in the question number 3, and their attitude toward the role in the BRI and what they thought could be a good way to improve their knowledge and maybe their involvement in the digital Silk Road. Let's see what were the results. First, according to the timeline of managers, we see that 63% were CEOs, while, of course, the 37% were CIOs. We must say that in Italy, according to what we have said before, that we are talking about small and medium enterprises, it is quite frequent that CEOs are the godfathers of the family who run the business. So essentially, they have both the role, they cover both the role of CEO and CIO. Then the knowledge or the supposed knowledge of the BRI. 44% has a good knowledge, or at least say they have a good knowledge, which is quite a low percentage if we think of the general public. And 25% has a partial knowledge. Considering the fact that we're talking about of supposed knowledge, they must be lowered. These percentages must be lowered. Then let's see about something about the attitude toward the massive digitization. And we see that the 83% have a positive attitude. That's to say that a lot of people in Italy who run their business in Italy are happy to deal with digitization, and they think that digitization could help a lot their companies to improve. That's to say they're potentially very interested in the digital Silk Road. What are the main factors against the BRI? This was a multiple answer question. First, we see that the 87% said that the lack of funds is a serious factor against the BRI. Of course, a lot of companies nowadays are struggling to have money, especially from the market and from the banks, especially because we're talking about small companies. That's to say, they have a lot of difficulties in having the credit from the financial institutes. Second, we have a 65% of unfair competition. So a good majority of the Italian companies fear the competition from the Chinese companies, who therefore would think that may be unfair. Then what could be the actions that could be taken in order to overcome this lack of knowledge and to involve better Italian companies in the digital Silk Road? 92% of the interviewed companies said that an informative campaign, very detailed and quite simple, could be a very useful instrument to overcome this problem and to make them part of the future, because this actually is the future of the world. So essentially, to wrap up, we see that there is the need for a serious, well-structured informational campaign on the BRI. And this is a very, very important key in order to enable those Italian SMEs to be part of the new world, of the new economic world. The knowledge development process could be boosted by a combined approach of several different clusters of subjects, giving the Italian and the EU managers a detailed large platform of information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Caridi. That was fascinating. Our next presentation will be from Dr. Anahit Parzyan, who is here at the Russian-Armenian University in person today. She's the Executive Director of the Nork Social Services Technology and Awareness Center Foundation in Armenia, and she'll be speaking about China's cyber diplomacy in Eurasia. Will there be a match? Dr. Parzyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Mr. Trakian. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor for us that you host this panel. Thank you, dear distinguished guests, for your presentations. It was really very interesting to see different perspectives regarding China's diplomacy in different geographical locations. And I'm going to talk about digital diplomacy and China's digital diplomacy, particularly to see whether it's going to be a match in the Eurasian region. Digital diplomacy is a new term which defines and which speaks about the new order, new path of international cooperation, particularly referring to internet communication and infrastructure diplomacy. It's a new method of cooperation, but as well as it's a new environment for different type of infrastructure protection mechanisms. And I think that this is a new platform that's still to be discussed and still to be discovered. China's diplomacy in cyberspace is a new topic of investigation, since it is not declared as a separate issue, but it is a part of One Belt and Road Initiative. It was not announced as a separate platform, the Digital Silk Road, but it is going very closely with Belt and Road Initiative. Thus, it is in an acceleration process that is becoming a huge problematic sometimes, and even sometimes cooperative issue for different regions and different organizations. The thing is that in a world order, when we have somehow regulations and norms of conduct, cyberspace is a new platform, is a man-made platform. Well, still, we don't have the legal regulations and norms, and we do not clearly understand the problems that we may face in future, and it's hard to put them on a legal level. Consequently, those who are powered in cyberspace are having more opportunities than those who are not, and they then don't have a legal regulations to cover their prospects and ideas in cyberspace. So China's diplomacy in cyberspace is becoming another tool for pushing infrastructure, dynamic in acceleration of China in different regions, particularly in cyberspace. But because the economy is very much dependent on cyber currently, and because our everyday life, starting from healthcare to education, our food and our governance is particularly connected to internet, we're going to have multiple platforms for newly discovered issues to be still figured out in cyberspace. Within this field, it's important to mention that although it is about connection in internet, but in a real world politics, we are having a disconnection in an internet form. And this is called a new kind of balkanization in cyberspace, which brings a different ideas regarding the implementation of infrastructure connection, as well as the governance system in cyberspace. Particularly, we have three camps differently described and differently approaching to regulations in cyberspace, mostly divided within cyber superpowers, particularly the US as historically having the country that has historical advantage in cyberspace. We have China that is growing fast and due to its market and very much electronicized and digitalized e-commerce. It's enlarging its opportunities, and also due to its economy, it's enlarging its investments in infrastructure, particularly cyber infrastructure, and Russia also accelerating its capacities in cyber. So within these three main players in cyberspace, we still have two camps, very much not connected to each other with ideas. The first camp is the combination of China and Russia, and here is the diplomacy that comes on the first place. China and Russia share the same ideas regarding norms of conduct in cyberspace, particularly governance in security governance and cybersecurity governments, which is mainly can be named in cyber sovereignty, while US is approaching more free approach to cyber regulations, and particularly is not pushing to regulations in a regional level, on a regional level, and does not refer to cyber sovereignty, which is the absolutely different approach to cyber regulations. Within this platform, within these ideas, it's hard, particularly for other countries that are somehow involved in cyberspace, define whether they should follow or join any of these camps, or they can still be part of a big interconnection, either of a cyberspace, but at the same time not being pushed to choose between any of the camps. And this cyber balkanization, this new cyber disconnection within the connected world is becoming a global issue, because if we define and if we make the difference in infrastructure systems, particularly starting from the very technical differences, it will somehow give a choice to any of the countries to join either these settings or that settings, which will definitely be a big and very huge problem for a global order, because in that case, the countries will not be connected, though being separately connected to the internet. This interconnection, this instability will bring to more difficulties in either e-commerce or in finances, and also in regulations. And we will have a big global issue regarding to regulations of these camps. And the thing is that China is approaching with this Road and Belt Initiative, pushing digital infrastructure systems to those countries which are already very active part of the of the Belt and Road Initiative. And within this case, we have the Eurasian region, where another big political economical entity is already is operating, that is the Eurasian Economic Union. And consequently, the new infrastructure development will be, of course, considered particularly considering the diplomacy in cyber. And if we conclude these ideas to this diplomacy, we will see that in the Russian region, the countries that are offered different types of connection procedures will be more pushed, or will be more comfortable in some cases as well with the Chinese and with the Russian initiative, which is mostly based on cyber sovereignty and more strict regulations. Which and how the countries will use this new format in cyberspace closely is dependent on their form of governance. If it is autocratic, then the technology will be used to press not only connections out of its states, but also inside of the states, particularly using the digital technologies to press the citizens of the specific country. But in that case, again, if we're looking at this picture from another perspective, the world is becoming less connected by this. Neither of these camps cannot operate separately. Doesn't matter how successful it is on its own way. The connection is needed. The distribution or the lack of distribution of resources is the main issue of the world in general, in any perspective. So we want to push the world to a peaceful cooperation. We should understand that probably based on diplomatic perspective, they can be different, such as we can still work peacefully within the world when there are autocratic, democratic, and liberal orders, and they can be connected also in cyberspace. What we need to push forward, but particularly those states that are not the initiative of any of these camp ideas, but are mostly those who should join this or that camp, they should be specific norms of conduct. The states should be more actively participating in the UN group of governmental experts and push their regulations and norms that will equally be protective for each of the states. Doesn't matter what kind of capacities they have in cyberspace. We should also push forward for interconnection of these infrastructure systems so that the developing countries consider it as not a diverse one. You have to choose this one or that one, but the ones that can be connected still can be connected to each other. Within that case, we can see and we will have the final peaceful connection in cyber rather than having disconnection in cyber. So these are the main issues that I wanted to stress, and I will be looking forward for any questions if the panelists and the audience will have. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Parzyan, for your fascinating talk. We'll move on now to Dr. Nehme Elias Khawly of INSEEC University in Paris, France. He'll be addressing Revolutionizing Soft Power, the Digital Silk Road in Eurasia and the MENA region. Dr. Khawly, the floor is yours.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Nehme Elias Khawly, and it is my pleasure and honor to be sharing with you my work. My special thanks goes to Dr. Meher Sahakyan and all the organizers of this conference for giving me the opportunity to participate, as well as all the auditors joining us right now. My topic, it is also about the digital Silk Road, but maybe more from the political perspective than other speakers. And it is entitled Revolutionizing Soft Power, the Digital Silk Road in Eurasia and the MENA. So let's have first a brief introduction of the topic. As a quick reminder again and again about the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, it's proposed in 2013 and revolves around Chinese investments in underdeveloped and developing nations, of course, where also infrastructure constitutes a massive part of these investments and setting China at the heart of international political economy. The Belt and Road Initiative also, it's a network, as we said, of land connections and the maritime Silk Road. The initiative exceeded initial expectations as it outgrew the initial corridors. And today, as far as I know, it is a host maybe to 139 countries so far, beneficiary countries. Now, moving to the digital Silk Road, the goal of the DSR, which was launched in 2015, is to contribute to the development and advance of digital connectivity on a global scale. On a global scale, especially among BRI beneficiaries, and also posing the People's Republic of China at the center of every digital exchange. Now, while the DSR is to complement the BRI from one hand, or to go hand by hand with the BRI, its projects, on the other hand, are related to the development of infrastructure affiliated with digital communication. And also exchanges such as 5G networks, data cables, also among others. So, therefore, the DSR, it will be observed from a holistic perspective in order to assess its contribution to the Sino-American competition, as well as its impact on Sino-international relations. Because as you know, as the shift towards the East has been accelerated by the BRI initiative, also this study will focus more on the Eurasian region and the MENA region, specifically on the MENA region, due to their geostrategic importance when it comes to international politics, and also because the nature of the states that fall in these regions are critical, whether they are underdeveloped or developing, or nations that are in crisis, and Lebanon is one of them now today in the Middle East. And also even the rich Gulf states. So the data and methods, the paper will tackle the DSR from two distinct approaches, the political-economic one and from one hand, and the socio-political on the second hand. For the political economic one, the geo-economic strategy where it plays its role, and this is a Chinese tactic always to use economic tools and instruments to achieve geopolitical objectives. And the socio-political one, it is, if you want, explained by how the digital Silk Road delves into or goes deeply into the microscopic scale of our daily life and reaches consumers directly, whether through Chinese digital apps or through Chinese satellites. And both the political economic and the socio-economic one, they are complementary to the increase of Chinese influence beyond its territory and through the use of soft power. And this subject is best treated by adopting the descriptive analytical methodology to describe the DSR and to analyze its impact, especially on based on document analysis of a secondary data. For the political economic one, the DSR has enhanced Beijing's rank as several nations, they have committed themselves to collaborate, also fostering nations' rapprochement, and the DSR has been proved to be efficient in this, and of course, positively affecting or impacting the economic growth of the engaged nations. So this has subsequently contributed, if you want, to the Beijing's optimal goal, which is swaying nations towards it and away from the Western Hemisphere, particularly the United States of America. But of course, in fulfilling the goals of the DSR, there have been some difficulties. There are some challenges, such as nations have become now more cautious of the Chinese ambitions, that they are geopolitical rather than developmental. Also, there are political escalations always that would hinder the diffusion of the digital Silk Road, particularly in this difficult region that is characterized by pluralism. For the socio-political aspect, the DSR has facilitated the diffusion of the passive, if you want, diffusion of Chinese interests, and also the influence beyond their territories through societal interactions that we said, mostly the digital apps. Also, it posits the Chinese alternatives to the traditionally Western commodities and instruments as proving to be more efficient. And we have an example of the Beidou. The Beidou, it's a Chinese satellite navigation system, which has proved itself to be more accurate than the GPS of the United States, also more accurate than GLONASS, the Russian GLONASS, and even better than the European Galileo. We have also the taxi hailing apps or programs that have surpassed the Uber, which is American. It has surpassed the Uber in many nations. So this has led China to be marking itself as an efficient alternative in almost all fields, because this is the last field that China has proved to be efficient in it, which is the sophisticated field, the digital field, if you want. The discussion and conclusion, so both the political-economic and the socio-political aspects of the digital Silk Road are complementary to reaping benefits at the domestic scale of China. This has been, like, if you want, a support for the domestic system of China, especially that in today's politics, it's controversial when a system is still operating under a one rule party, which is the CCP in the case of China, or the Chinese Communist Party. So the aforementioned aspects contribute to the CCP's quest to consolidate its hold of the Chinese governance. This DSR, it has increased the morale of the CCP, and also it has strengthened it, and it has raised approval points for it among the Chinese population. Therefore, the DSR no doubt has increased China's influence on the global scene, starting with the Eastern Hemisphere, most notably Eurasia and MENA, both regions which hold significant importance for the United States foreign policy making, and because these are pivotal geopolitical areas for the pursuit of the interests of the United States. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my speech.
We very much did. Thank you very much, Dr. Khawly, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Very insightful. Our next presenter is Dr. Ruben Elamiryan, Chairperson and Associate Professor at the Department of World Politics and International Relations of the Russian-Armenian University, again, where we are sitting and hosted today. He's also the Executive Officer of IPSA, RC41 Geopolitics. He'll be addressing cybersecurity in NATO and CSTO, comparative analysis of legal and political frameworks. Dr. Elamiryan, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. At the same time, I would like to use this opportunity and thank the organizers and specifically Dr. Parzyan for this great conference, and especially for putting it together during these uncertain times. So now I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
As it was told, the topic of the presentation is cybersecurity in NATO and CSTO, comparative analysis of legal and political frameworks. So the main objective of the research is to compare cybersecurity policies of two international organizations, NATO and Collective Security Treaty Organization. As cases for comparison, we choose organizations consisting of countries with rather different approaches to cybersecurity. The countries have very specific legislation regulating the cyberspace, and both organizations have a leader country, the US and Russia. The paper consists of the following main parts: discussion of the concept of cyber warfare and choose of the working definition for cybersecurity, research of the legal and policy framework of cybersecurity in NATO, the same for the CSTO, and we are coming with several conclusions. So at the methodology and method and scope of research, so we have two case studies, as it was mentioned above, as well as we are going through the global ranking, ITU Global Cybersecurity Index. And when I say we, I would like to mention that this presentation and the research was performed with a colleague of mine from St. Petersburg University, Radomir Volgov. So when it comes to the working definition for this paper, cybersecurity is understood as a set of technical and not technical policies, security arrangements, actions, guidelines, risk management measures, allowing to provide political, social, ethnic, and cultural evolutionary modernization of the critical cyber infrastructure, as well as protection of vital interests of human society and state. So when it comes to NATO cybersecurity, the beginning of the ICT transformation of the armed forces of the NATO countries is considered to be in 1987, when the decision was made to modernize the equipment, which was transformed in 1991 in the overall concept of soldier of the future. The turning point was 2002, when at the summit in Prague, NATO countries decided to develop a program to counter the cyber attacks. Particularly, NATO leadership formed new special bodies. First of all, its Computer Incidents Response Capabilities Center, Hague Research Center for checking existing systems and developing new standards for protection, the program for the development of secure communication systems. Also, a special agency was developed which will deal with gathering intelligence and coordinating the actions of NATO members in the fight against cyber crimes. In 2008, at the NATO summit in Bucharest, the decision was made to allocate a cyber defense policy to a separate line of work. This decision was due to the powerful cyber attacks that took place in May 2007 in Estonia and directed to the websites of NATO and the government of Estonia, which is a member of the NATO. And secondly, the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence was built up in May 2008 in Tallinn. It should be noted that the development of cyber defense infrastructure by NATO countries is due not only to the series of cyber attacks in May 2007, but to the constant attacks that the cyber infrastructure of NATO has undergone since the Kosovo operation in 1999. Despite the systemic and comprehensive approach to provide cybersecurity, the following issues impedes progress within the NATO. First of all is the limited military budget of the European members of NATO. And the solution, Prague Summit Declaration, and the commitment to focus on a small number of forces and means that play a decisive role in fulfilling NATO's entire range of attacks. Secondly, its heterogeneous position within NATO on cybersecurity and ICT modernization of the armed forces. And finally, the next line of discussion is about hard and soft security and perception of the member states toward these two concepts. When it comes to success and failures in cybersecurity at the summits of 2004, 2017, NATO's Defense Requirements Review 2005 announced the launch of the concept of network-enabled capabilities, which included the concept regulates issues of synchronizing the actions of high-tech units of the armed forces of the NATO member states, particularly introduction of modern communication systems, development of prospective C4 ICR systems, as well as reform of organizational structures for the management of the armed forces, the retraining of personnel, the reform of the doctrinal base. We go forward. So you can see here several NATO summits in Istanbul, Riga, Chicago, Wales, Warsaw. They are interesting in the context of cyber weapons, although neither Istanbul nor Riga summits proposed absolutely new cyber initiatives. At the same time, the NATO strategic concept adopted at the Lisbon summit in November 2010 states that cyber attacks have become more frequent, more organized, and pose a significant threat to the life-supporting infrastructure. NATO members have committed themselves to coordinate their actions in this field through a single cyber defense body that must be created, but it was not specified by whom, when, and who is responsible. The lack of specifics again indicate that there is no consensus on this issue within NATO. And later on, we will see that there is the same issue in the CSTO too. So when it comes to the CSTO approach to cybersecurity, very briefly about the organization. As a treaty, it was established in 1992, and it was reformed into an organization in 2002. So the charter's key article 4 states that if one of the member states undergoes aggression, all other member states should come and help, basically speaking. However, an open question remains if the Article 4 covers the issue of cybersecurity too. Article 8 of the Charter states that member states interact in fields of border protection, information exchange, information security protection of population and territory from emergency situation of natural and technogenic character, as well as from dangers derived from military actions. More details with regard to cybersecurity provides the following two documents. So it's the strategy of 2025 and the agreement on development of cooperation. So according to the first document on the strategy of CSTO, collective security for the period till 2025, which is approved in 2016, and again, the agreement. So generally speaking, the organization pays increasing attention to the provision of information security. This is the approach how the organization understands also cybersecurity. However, neither the chapter nor various high-level declarations provide clue if the Article 4 of the Charter also refers to information aggression and how the CSTO member states would coordinate and combine their efforts to withstand information operations against any of them. At the same time, the agreement of 2017 describes the CSTO perception of threats to information security as factors which create danger for persons, society, state, and information field. And what I want to emphasize here is that there is a rather different perception of the concepts in CSTO area and NATO area, which is also kind of changing these days in the CSTO area. So In NATO, so there is this term cybersecurity. Whenever CSTO uses the term information security, which encompasses information technological level and also information psychological operations. So the perception is a bit different. So I'm going to skip these parts and to save a bit of time, but I want to stop on the structure of the organization to demonstrate the understanding and dealing with the cyber or information security issues. So you can see the whole structure on your screens. And it clearly demonstrates that there is only one division which is directly responsible for the provision of information security. At the same time, 3 more bodies are responsible for information security. It's Parliamentary Assembly, which coordinates the activities on harmonization of national legislations, including in information or cyber sphere. It's an analytical association of the CSTO, and also CSTO University League. The last 2 organizations provide academic partnership and university cooperation among the member states, organizing various academic practical events. And at the same time, one of the most successful evidence of the CSTO joint activities in information security can be, and also we can say cybersecurity, can be considered the so-called proxy operation from Russian counteraction to crime in the sphere of information. And the main goal of the operations is to reveal and suppress the functioning of such information resources in national segments of internet, the content of which damage or can damage national and collective security of the member states. It started in 2009, and since then, about 80,000 dangerous information resources were revealed by 2017. Thus, we see that nowadays the organization in terms of information and cybersecurity on institutional level operates mostly within the framework of coordination of efforts. However, the problem is that the CSTO member states very often have, if not conflictual, but at least different interests, not only in terms of information security, but also with regard to the organization's general activities. The latter largely impedes the effective functioning of the strategic goals. At the same time, another impediment to the effective functioning is a different level of cybersecurity development in the member states, as well as approaches to provide cybersecurity. So you can see the difference level here on your screen. So according to the index of cybersecurity, though the CSTO average is about 0.415, where maximum is 1 in 2017, but we see that the spectrum is rather diverse. So in Armenia, it's 0.196, the level, and in Russia, it's 0.788. While in NATO member countries, the spectrum is rather close. So US is on the top, approximately 0.9, but the lowest is 0.6 or 0.7 even. So the difference is not that much high. Though we can see here that average is rather close. So in case of NATO, it's 0.6, and in case of the CSTO, it's 0.4. Yeah. Thus, we can conclude that currently the CSTO information security system is in the process of the development. Despite very active steps and comprehensive perception of the modern problems in cyber domain, the CSTO doesn't have clear vision how to provide joint cybersecurity and operatively unite the member states' capabilities against the threats and challenges in cyberspace. And as I have mentioned before, there was an idea to establish kind of joint coordination center but in 2016, but it never appeared. And when we're checking the strategy of development till 2025, that point even not mentioned. So we see that the relationship between external and internal cybersecurity policies in CSTO and NATO is not simply a coincidence of legal restrictions within the organization and international initiative with the same restrictions. However, depending on specific demands, this policy is aimed at improving either the external image on the side of international community or internal one on the side of the national waters. Despite the different approaches to cyber conflicts regulation, NATO and CSTO, cyber policies have some common features. They legitimize cyber conflict. Both approaches assume that in case of any international conflict, the right of parties to choose methods or means of cyber war is limited to the applicable rules of international humanitarian law. As for the differences in the approaches between the sides, so we should consider not only a different level of openness for innovations in such a conservative sphere as a military one, and it's not only which department is a driver of information security, depending on the country. There is also different cognitive style. The military and political leaders of each state have its own cultural patterns that determine the views and the policy resulting from them in the field of military technology. However, there is no need to overemphasize on the cultural differences that affect the cyber warfare policy. There is a number of common problems for all states. Cyber warfare policy. ICT technical aspects are almost the same everywhere because the connection of parts in telecommunication networks doesn't depend on the cognitive style. I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your attention, and it would be my great pleasure to take your questions. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Elamiryan. That was profoundly insightful and very interesting. We have just about 5 minutes for questions. I will check quickly the chat box. There haven't been any questions from the floor, so I'll go ahead and ask one and give each panelist the chance to respond. In the midst of all this, the rollout of the digital Silk Road, all these norms and development levels in cybersecurity in different regions, how do smaller countries like Armenia strike a balance across these various models? What are the implications for data policy and digital infrastructure development? What's a potential winning formula for small states? And why don't we start with our panelist here in the room, Dr. Parzyan.
Thank you very much for an insightful and very important question. This is a really question that the majority of the world is going to think about in the nearest future, because it, besides some of the states, refers to all our nations. Of course, norms and the regulations are the only thing that the small states should think about and focus their efforts to regulate and to have specific lights, the green light, the red line, and everything must be defined clearly so that we can know how to be in this very new developed crossroad. But at the same time, it's very important for small states to clearly define their national interests on their own, because in that case, they can communicate these through different channels, and by only considering their own national interest, then we'll understand in which part they can somehow cooperate and which parts are the red lines for their nation not to be involved in any kind of initiatives that will be harmful for their future. The majority of the small states are usually not quite clear what they really want and what they really are capable of in the future. That is why they sometimes are just involved in specific initiatives, which further are not effective, neither for big initiatives and also particularly for the small states and their nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the response. Dr. Khawly, would you like to go next? It's just a general question from all that you've laid out, especially on the political and digitization. How do small countries navigate and strike a balance across these norms and, frankly, very much the political, you could call them pressures or directions that you outlined in your presentation?
Yes, actually, this is what I was saying in the section about the challenges and difficulties in fulfilling the DSR goals, that countries have become more cautious about China's ambitions, that they are geopolitical rather than developmental. And actually, it is through the war of media that is created by the Western, if you want, the United States of America particularly, to create pressures on these nations that what China is wants to achieve, or what China's ambitions are, just for geopolitical region, in order for geopolitical purposes, in order to change, if you want, the international order, or to sway nations towards it and away from the West.
Thank you. Dr. Sciacovelli, would you like to weigh in as well?
Yes, it was a very interesting questions. In Europe, we have the chance to be integrated in the European strategy, digital strategy. So we are inside the digital European strategy, and every state has also its own strategy, a national strategy that is very important to develop to defend the digital perimeter. So there is a huge practical problem, theoretical, practical problem, there's also a political one. But we are under the umbrella of European Union. So in my opinion, it's easier to defend, to find a common defense, as this strategy is part of the wider defense European policy. We have also the NATO umbrella that was very well told before by our colleague and panelist.
Thank you. Dr. Elamiryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Basically speaking, I fully agree with Dr. Parzyan that it doesn't matter if we have small states or medium-sized states, they should kind of specify their national interests, which will help them to navigate the direction. But at the same time, my concern is that the world is getting more and more conflictual, and especially for small countries, it's getting, I guess, more and more complex to have this opportunity for maneuver. And at the end of the day, I mean, if we are ending up in a more conflictual environment, most probably it would be like really complex for small states to navigate. This is my concern.
Thank you. Dr. Caridi?
Yeah, maybe for the small states, the use of the blockchain technology could be an issue to be evaluated, because through the blockchain, a solid cybersecurity level could be reached, and even from a lower cost for the overall system, enabling that way even smaller countries to participate to the digital question. So that could be an issue though to be evaluated, I think.
Terrific. Dr. Giorgio Caridi, Dr. Ruben Elamiryan, Dr. Nehme Khawly, Dr. Annita Larissa Sciacovelli, and Dr. Anahit Parzyan, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.